maybe they just released it, they'll release it in the next couple of months. There is something coming, so there are concerns of that, obviously, but if they want to think that if they can import soil and contain it, that they can get around that. Yes.
As the project progresses, do you anticipate seeing also students being involved in these planning meetings?
I would like to, because I think it's important, even if it's a fifth grader in a K-5 school, I think it's important that students are involved in their, that they have some say in what their interaction engagement is in that environment. How much, I mean, that's always the issue, who gets to say what and how much do they get to say, and even though the intent is to give it to kids, how much are we going to let them kind of take the reins for it? But I don't know what's going on here.
Sorry.
I would love to see students there. So hopefully, come November, if there are a few present, that moving forward we can get them engaged. Way in the back.
Hi, I'm a natural farmer, and one of the benefits that I observed through a friend of mine in Hilo, who is a teacher volunteer, is the actual physical health of the kids playing in the dirt with the inoculation and exposure to healthy microbes in the soil. They actually have, the kids that get to play in the garden actually have less sick days because of exposure to the microbes. If you have healthy natural microbes in your soil. And he's a natural farmer and he's all about microbes, so it's one of those things, it's a collateral benefit of just getting kids into the dirt.
Absolutely.
And if it's not too toxic for the steel mill, there are, through natural farming, there are a bunch of different fungi and bacteria used to bioremediate contaminated soils, lead, petroleums, and all that other stuff.
Yeah, and that was something that was like way another branch that went off of this project, but my capstone advisor, Dr. Kelly Gelhoff from Colorado, she has a couple of little projects going on, and one of them is to work with fungi.
They're amazing. We used them in New Orleans right after Katrina with mind-boggling results.
That's great.
Are there particular grades where you have first graders, second graders, right on through to fifth grade? Do all grades participate? Is there any kind of curriculum in terms of this paralleled with science classes or what have you?
Yeah, so, and I'll steal from the Edible Schoolyards model. They have first through fifth grade. They have curriculum for all of it. And the best example I found was for New York State, and so that's not to say that it wouldn't work in Colorado, but every state has different standards. So I think that would be a model to base it on, that it would be, yes, it would be first grade, second grade, third grade, all the way through fifth. And the way that program runs is that first graders get maybe they get 5 hours a month, or the first graders get maybe 5 hours a month, and the fifth graders get like 10 hours a month. So it's just kind of it's a scaled system. But again, going back to the curriculum, and that's where Denver Urban Gardens is going to be a huge asset in this. And with Local Food Pueblo, they've already reached out to them and kind of spoke to Denver Urban Gardens. Is really developing a curriculum that's specific to Pueblo in that community and that culture, but also making sure that it meets the state standards.
Just a follow-up. So would the first graders have their row of plants and the second grade have their row, or is it all just working around?
I guess I didn't get that far into it. It's, I think that maybe there could be some level of competition involved where, hey, here's the first grade plot, you get 500 square feet and so on all the way through fifth. But it's really, again, when we sit down, hopefully we're able to identify, what do we want to get out of this, what's important. If that's important, let's do it. If, there's something else that's important, to do that.
Okay.
All
Good.
right, Chris.
My name is Mary Sutton, and I have the pleasure to introducing my colleague and comrade in action, Gopal Dayaneni. Gopal should actually be receiving his PhD today. He's acted as both faculty and student in this program and has provided us with a wealth of information and experience. Thank you.
I don't normally ever get nervous when I have to speak, but I am now for some reason. Doesn't normally happen. Hi, my name is Gopal, and my capstone project was on building community wealth and power, particularly in Richmond, California, which is very close to where I live, and trying to build a national model for how we can propagate community wealth and resilience in the face of ecological erosion and social inequity. My actual capstone project was a portfolio that brought together curriculum, assessment tools, business models, learnings from the development of this project over the last couple of years, and with the resources of the Antioch University, I was able to bring a little additional work to that. Ooh, I forgot to start my timer, which means I have more time. So this is me, and that's my wife Martha, and I just want to start by saying a little bit about my relationship to this work. So I live in an intentional community of 9 adults and 8 kids. We live cooperatively. We range in age from 85 to 6 years old, and I work in a democratically collectivized organization called Movement Generation, where we make our decisions democratically and we all get paid the same. My kids go to an after-school cooperative that is all of us parents sharing a day and watching everybody else's kids. And I train and teach martial arts at a dojo that is collectively organized and run, where the decisions are all made cooperatively and where nobody is turned away for lack of funds. And I say that because a big part of my journey and my work has been trying to figure out what it looks like for us to live more democratically, to organize more democratically, and to treat each other in relationships of cooperation rather than relationships of greed. And so I say that to say that it would be intellectually dishonest for me to suggest that the work I'm about to talk about was done by myself. It is work that has been the blood, sweat, and tears and support of a lot of folks. And so you'll hear me use the term we a lot. The we refers to both the Steering Committee of Cooperation Richmond, which I'll talk about. The we refers to Movement Generation, which I'll talk about. But the we also refers to the climate justice movement and the economic justice movement and the communities with which we work. So I'll try to use I statements sometimes, but I'm hoping to use a lot of we statements. I want to start with a little framing around sustainability. At Antioch University, we do not separate social equity from ecological integrity. And in fact, if you try and address social issues without addressing ecological issues, you will fail. And if you try and address ecological issues without addressing social issues, you will fail. In fact, the measure of economic justice will be ecological integrity, and the measure of ecological justice will be economic equity. So we see them as together, and because of that, the way we understand, I'm someone who works in the climate space, I'm not interested in looking up at the atmosphere and counting carbon. I'm interested in looking down at communities, at the exploitation of seed, of soil, of story, of land, of labor. So this project is based on the relationship between those two. And this quote by Eduardo Galeano says it best. So the question is, if you want to address both, how do you do that? You have to have both a vision and a set of strategies. So the vision is this idea of a just transition. What does it look like to transition our economies from ones of dirty energy to ones of clean energy, from ones of destructive development to ones of community wealth building, to ones of exploitation to ones of cooperation? So we thought to ourselves, what's the vision? And the vision is that people in communities should have the right to control and the right to have access to the resources required to create productive, dignified, and ecologically sustainable livelihoods. And then the question is, what's the strategy to get there? And the strategy to get there is to build local economic development infrastructure that advances that agenda. One of my roles was to actually develop curriculum, and so I want to share just a little piece of framing that we start with. So mostly I work with low-income communities and communities of color throughout the United States, and particularly in the Bay Area. And one of the things that we start with is a basic understanding of the economy. And the vast majority of people I work with are just barely getting by, right? 1% owns more wealth than 90% of people in the United States. And in fact, any one person in this room who has more assets than they have debt, that means any person in this room who is not in debt, any one person in this room has more wealth than the bottom 40% of all Americans, because 40% of Americans are in debt. And debt is an infringement upon your labor. It is a form of slavery, because it means that no matter how hard you work, someone else gets to take the fruits of your labor, right? So any one person in this room, including myself, is richer than 40% of all Americans. So most of us are just barely getting by. And so what's the solution to that? Well, the story they tell us is that the solution to that is getting ahead. That you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That you work hard. Now, notwithstanding the fact that most of the communities I work with don't even have access to boots, that the access to boots is systematically foreclosed upon, let alone bootstraps. Even if you did pull yourself up by your bootstraps to get ahead, that means you are by definition leaving other people behind. Whether it's your neighbors or your family or your friends or your community or even entire nations. So what's the right answer? The right answer is actually getting together. That the solution to exploitation is cooperation. And that is what we should be aiming for, building an economy rooted in cooperation with each other and with the living systems upon which we depend. So as Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said, we can have democracy or we may have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we cannot have both. So we set out to figure out how do we build that kind of infrastructure, and I'm going to tell the story of the work we did in Richmond, California. So a little bit about Richmond. Richmond is in the northeast Bay. It is became an industrial powerhouse during World War II, doing shipbuilding and other things. And I have a 20-year history of working for environmental and economic justice in Richmond with folks there. So a little bit about Richmond. Richmond is one of the poorest parts of the Bay Area. Wow, holy crap. All right. It's one of the poorest parts of the Bay Area. It is home to the Chevron refinery, which is the largest stationary source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California. It is one of the most polluting facilities in the state. It's one of the largest refineries in the Western Americas. It has some of the highest foreclosure rates, some of the highest asthma and cancer rates, some of the highest police violence rates. It is also the home of an enormous amount of resilience and resistance. It has a thriving social movement that builds urban farms, green jobs programs, a climate justice movement that has fought the Chevron refinery, a progressive city council, largest city in the country with a green mayor, that has supported cooperative development and alternative economic development and clean energy. It's fought foreclosures. And so we set out to build an incubator called Cooperation Richmond that provides coaching, connections, and capital in the Richmond community for the development of community-owned and controlled economic development projects in line with our vision of ecological sustainability. And a big part of my work and my capstone is helping develop this. We developed curriculum and trainings and workshops in the community. I helped develop the business model and then later the business plan, all to launch this cooperative incubator, which now is now a year and a half old. And a big part of that work was supporting the first pancake. We took that expression from Gilda Haas, which was the Rich City Rides Bike Cooperative, an emerging worker-owned cooperative of Richmond residents. All folks of color, one formerly incarcerated person, one undocumented person, which is one of the great things about cooperatives. And a big part of my work was helping them figure out what they needed, and doing assessments, helping them with democratic governance, helping them assess their inventory. I connected them with Strength in Numbers, which is a worker-owned cooperative bookkeeping firm that helped them get their taxes in order so they could get incorporated. We connected them and facilitated the process with the co-op lawyer who's gotten them their incorporation and their co-op status. And finally, we got them connected to, with Cooperation with Richmond, to get access to capital to create productive, to improve their business. And Rich City Rides has been denied access to finance through conventional finance repeatedly because they're formerly incarcerated folks. There's a character exclusion. They don't have any collateral because they're poor folks. So they've been denied access to finance. So I just want to quickly say that there's three kinds of investment you can make in a community. You can make extractive investment, which is where you put just enough money in to take more wealth out. That's what a payday lending is. You can have inward investment, which is like what the stimulus money is. You put money into the community and hope that it'll spur some kind of economic development, like shovel-ready projects, which usually defaults to things like freeways and things like that. Or you can do internal investment, and that's where the wealth generated in a community stays in the community and circulates in the community. And you do that through things like local currency, you do that through things like community banking, you do that through things like worker-owned cooperatives, and you do that through things like a revolving loan fund, which we created to support these kinds of projects. And we knew that it wasn't enough to do it just in Richmond. And so we started building with folks all around the country to launch local non-extractive revolving loan funds that are based on the idea that capital should be in the service of the people and not the other way around. And the first and oldest fund was the Working World, and then we launched the Southern Reparations Loan Fund, and then one in Baltimore, and Cooperation Richmond, and Gilda leads one in LA, and we're building more. And there'll be new ones when the clicker goes. And finally, I just want to leave you with the closing principle, which is that Earth democracy, which is what we believe is required, connects people in circles of care, cooperation, and compassion instead of dividing them through competition and conflict, fear, and hatred. Thank you. That took a lot longer than I thought. So, Mary, you're going to keep time, right? And make sure that I don't go too long. So, questions? I know that was a lot to throw at you in a short amount of time. I see a hand there. Go ahead.
Do you work with Slow Money NorCal at all?
I know those folks a little bit. Slow Money's a little bit different. I mean, they're doing interesting work, and I think it's another great system of kind of reimagining finance. The core principles of the way that we provide lending is that actually the communities need to be in control of the decisions, not those who have current control of capital. So we operate on a set of principles that are rooted in the idea that there's a whole set of principles that actually are designed to democratize the decision-making process and actually separate the people with money from control over the decisions and how the projects work. But I also think they do great work.
Well, because I was going to say, I know here in SoCal, our Slow Money started working with the Keep a Loan program in the United States.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if they were doing that too.
Yeah, keep it also, they do an interesting revolving loan system. The interesting thing about that, again, is that the wealth is actually owned and controlled by a private corporation that gets to decide if and when it continues or shuts down. Whereas what we're doing is building wealth in the community, and that wealth stays in the community, and when you get a loan, you are part of the decision-making about how loans get given out in the future. Thank you. I'll go with Yolanda, and then there's someone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question just as in moving forward, are you looking into developing kind of toolkits or model approaches for communities of color, low income? Also, I guess pairing, for instance, with churches who have community development programs, but I'm not sure exactly what's being developed, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of works in this area.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, actually, the first thing is there's a core principle here, which is the principle of radical inclusion, which actually doesn't mean that anybody who wants to can join in. It actually means that we target those who are most excluded from access. So for example, things like credit, collateral, and character are 3 of the ways that people get restricted access to finance. So we don't use any of those, we don't take collateral, because you can't leave a community off worse than they were when you started. We don't use character, because that's what they use to justify not lending to formerly incarcerated folks. So this is specifically about reaching those communities, and all of it is open source. So actually, the resources that we developed are shared within a larger peer network of local funds, and lots of folks have reached out to us. I'm actually meeting with some folks in Hawaii who are getting ready to launch a local fund there, and I roped in Gilda, who's kind of coordinating the local fund here in LA. So it is intended to be outward facing and to bring more folks in, and all of the resources are open source and shared, including the systems that we've developed. In the way back?
Yeah, so have you used or considered Bitcoin in your local currency as a way for transferring, or has it even been considered?
Not in Richmond. We're not actually focused. The Bay Area has Bay Area bucks, which is our local currency that we use. But actually, there are folks in Boston who are starting a project called the Ujima Project, which is very similar to what we're doing. And one of the things that they're doing is their local currency is a virtual currency, and it will involve quote unquote plastic, but it'll be essentially virtual currency as a way of supporting their efforts. I don't know a whole lot about blockchain and Bitcoin, and I'm a Luddite, so I should have probably just said I don't know the answer to your question. That would have been the smart thing to do. Hold on, I'm going to call the person in the back.
Oh, good.
Oh, my eyes aren't good enough.
The funding is, I'm sure it differs in each group, but how much is the amount of funding available to fund, and what is it you're funding for these various?
So we're funding worker-owned and community-owned cooperatives, and the financing, by aggregating all of the local funds together, we're currently a $6 million fund, and across the country we're aiming to be a $20 million fund within 5 years. And one of the really innovative things that we're doing is working with, thank you, Catherine. One of the innovative things we're doing is working with student divestment folks. So we're working with fossil fuel and prison divestment movements to force their institutions to divest from fossil fuels and put a portion of those resources into these funds to support communities who have been impacted by the extractive industries like prisons and fossil fuels. So that's kind of the one of the mechanisms, and there's a lot more details, and I can talk to you about it later if you'd like, but I have to wrap up now. So thank you all very much. I also have the privilege of introducing Mary Sutton. Mary is an incredibly fierce organizer, a lifelong organizer who's been committed to prison abolition, and because she understands deeply and fundamentally that humans do not belong in cages. From the beginning of this program, she has had a laser eye focus on applying principles of sustainability, from everything from understanding entropy and its relationship to the prison industrial complex, all the way to the collaborative work that we got to do around developing cooperatives for formerly incarcerated folks. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mary Sutton.
Wow.
Okay, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. Gopal's presentation is an excellent background for my project as well. The title of my capstone project is Build Cooperatives, Not Prisons and Jails. The culmination of my work in the Urban Sustainability Program at Antioch is multifaceted and ongoing. My final submission includes 3 main pieces. First, a proposal for Collective Remake, a unique social enterprise that will support the creation of worker cooperatives with people impacted by incarceration. Second is a business plan for Collective Remake's first worker cooperative, Recycle for Jobs. Third is a summary and outline of curriculum and resources for a series of cooperative education workshops that I implemented over the summer. Also, I have included several research papers which I have done over the last 2 years, including one about the public and private financing of prison and jails, for which I won the Antioch Library Research Award. So about me. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a girl child of a large liberal Catholic family, 4 boys, 4 girls. I raised 2 beautiful daughters as a single mom, and now I am a grandma.
And she is so
She's here tonight. I've been a political activist and artist since my early 20s. The graphics and art in this presentation are a reflection of my political growth and the grassroots organizing that I've been involved in. I was enlightened in the 1970s when I took my first women's studies classes, where I was exposed to radical feminist literature and Marxist theory as an art student at the University of Minnesota and in many subsequent radical study groups. I was able to support my family and buy a home at the age of 25 because for 13 years I held a living wage job as a union bus driver in the Metro Transit system. From the late 70s to the mid-1990s, I was active in the movement to end apartheid in South Africa. I was a founding member of the Twin Cities Committee for the Liberation of Southern Africa. From 1984 to 1994, or 1948 to 1994, the apartheid regime in South Africa, backed by the U.S. and Israel, maintained a brutal system of legal segregation that was modeled after the Jim Crow laws in the United States. The Jim Crow laws are now understood to be a precursor to what evolved into the mass incarceration and disenfranchisement of millions of people of color in the United States. In September 2001, I came to Los Angeles with my youngest daughter to support a friend, Sarah Olson, who was facing trial on charges from the 1970s. A week later, 9/11 happened, and Sarah took a plea bargain. She spent 8 years in one of 2 women's prisons in Chowchilla, California. At the time, the 2 largest women's prisons in the world. I made many trips up Highway 99, known as Prison Alley, to see Sarah. I often brought her mother to visit as well. Through this experience, I gained a deeper understanding of the complete devastation to families and whole communities, the full costs and the complicity of a complex network of participants who hold up the prison industrial complex. The critical resistance uses the term prison industrial complex to describe the overlapping interests of government and industry that use surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as solutions to economic, social, and political problems. I joined CR and became active in the movement to stop prison and jail expansion in California. I helped launch the LA No More Jails Coalition that is still fighting today. We also push for available funds to build community solutions. If we reinvest in communities, what could be reparations, and care for all people, we can renew lives, build healthy, vibrant communities, create sustainable economic solutions, and put an end to putting human beings in cages. Unfortunately, just last Tuesday, the Los Angeles Board of Supervisors voted to move forward with a multi-billion-dollar jail plan, including a new jail for women up in Lancaster and a new facility that will replace Men's Central, and it will house over 3,000 people diagnosed with mental illness. Yes, despite the fact that there is a broader awareness that the U.S. incarcerates more people than any other country, with over 2.2 million people locked up in prison and jail, and millions of people of color that have been systematically disenfranchised. 1 in 3 black men, 1 in 6 Latino men will spend time in prison or jail in their lifetime. Black women are the fastest growing segment of the prison population. Despite all this, California continues to spend billions on prison and jail expansion without voter approval. Just in the last 2 years, the state allocated over $1 billion to support county jail expansion across California. In 2011, Governor Brown implemented realignment to reduce prison overcrowding, as mandated by the U.S. Supreme Court. People convicted of nonviolent, non-serious crimes will do their time in county jail instead of state prison. There's also realignment dollars that are coming to each county to manage this population. Los Angeles County, with the largest jail system in the world, has garnered over $1.5 billion for realignment. But instead of using it to invest in programs and jobs to lower the rate of incarceration and reduce recidivism, the County Board of Supervisors has allocated 80% of that money to the Sheriff's Department and probation. Despite the reduction in the state prison population, partially due to realignment, the annual state prison budget is still over $10 billion. The annual cost has gone up for each individual in the system has gone up from $49,000 to over $65,000. Los Angeles County spends $233,000 on each juvenile that it incarcerates a year. Remember this grid line. It represents a drastic increase in incarceration rates, slashes in funding for social programs, increases in education costs, and decreases in K through 12 education funding. The last 4 decades are referred to as the age of austerity, a time of extreme economic divides caused by an unbridled growth market and political policies accepted by both Republicans and Democrats. The neoliberal policies created what Stephen Pitts calls the age of inequality. From 1948 to 1973, productivity rose by 96.7%, and compensation for labor rose 91.3%. Workers received increases in pay and benefits equivalent to the growth of the economy. From 1973 to 2013, the economy grew by 74%, yet compensation for work only grew by 9.2%. Currently over 50, oh my typo. Currently over 50% of the working age black adults are unemployed or underemployed in Los Angeles County. Opportunities for folks coming home from years of lockup are few. There are no jobs. Thousands of people are released from prison and jail every month to Los Angeles County, yet the odds are stacked against them. Over 70% will return within 3 years. No one has to wait to ask permission to build worker-owned businesses. The organization I have designed, Collective Remake, art, business, education, news, people, and recycling for sustainability, supports the creation of worker cooperatives with people impacted by incarceration. Collective Remake will adhere to the scientific and social principles of sustainability, as well as the 7 cooperative principles and values adopted by the International Cooperative Alliance in 1995. A worker cooperative is a business owned and run democratically by the people that work there. Every worker owner has an equal say in how the business is run, how profits will be spent, and it will benefit all of them and their community. One worker, one vote. There are no bosses. People who are impacted include former prisoners, people that are still locked up inside prisons and jails, and their family and loved ones who sacrifice so much financially and emotionally to support their loved ones inside. True sustainability is achieved at the intersection of economic equality, social justice, and environmental protection. A caring, nurturing community and sufficient sustainable economy will provide for everyone. Economic development will protect the environment and the people in the community. People must be a part of the equation. There are 6 principles of sustainability that provide a practical guide to assess whether any development or investment in infrastructure is sustainable. The 3 scientific principles demonstrate how natural ecosystems are sustained through solar energy, the cycling of chemical resources, and the biodiversity of which we are a part. The 3 social science principles include measuring the full long-term cost of any project or development to the whole community, creating win-win solutions. Everyone impacted must benefit, committing to outcomes that will improve the quality of life for future generations. The disproportionate distribution of wealth in Los Angeles and the evident disparities as to who is healthy and wealthy and who goes to prison is not a win-win outcome. The full cost of construction and the operation of prison and jails and the financial and emotional loss to loved ones and communities must be accounted for. The burden to future generations and the damage to children is devastating. Cooperative values support self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. The 7 cooperative principles promote voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, economic participation, independence, ongoing education and training, and concern for the community. Worker cooperatives may not constitute the full revolution, but they